Welcome to a place where silence hides strategy, and every goodbye could be the beginning of something far more dangerous. Here, love isn't always what it seems, and trust can turn into the sharpest weapon of all. These are stories where betrayal doesn't break someone, it builds them, where secrets unfold slowly, revealing double lives, hidden affairs, and calculated lies that were never meant to be discovered. You'll step into gripping family dramas filled with raw emotion, quiet revenge, and powerful comebacks that no one sees coming. Every story pulls you deeper into a world where patience beats chaos and heartbreak transforms into control. If you're drawn to shocking truths, emotional twists, and endings that leave you stunned, you're exactly where you need to be. Because sometimes the person who looks the most broken is the one who's already won. The night he left for that 2-year overseas contract, the performance was flawless. Soft sobs, trembling hands, a long embrace at the door. He kissed a forehead like everything between us was still sacred, like trust hadn't already been quietly bleeding out for months. The car pulled away, and the silence that followed felt heavier than grief. It felt like truth finally had space to breathe. Long before that goodbye, the cracks had started to show. Late night calls taken in another room, passwords suddenly changed, receipts that didn't add up. And then the discovery that rewrote everything. A second life carefully hidden behind business trips and networking dinners. Another woman, another set of promises. Shared money spent like it meant nothing. The tears that night weren't for him. They were for the time wasted believing loyalty was mutual. Access to the joint account had always been shared, built on what used to be trust. But while he planned a future elsewhere, careful steps were already being taken here. Documents gathered, statements printed, evidence quietly secured. And when the moment came, every dollar of the $375,000 that had been built together was moved with precision, not stolen, claimed. The next morning, the lawyer's office felt colder than expected, but clarity often does. Papers were filed without hesitation, every detail aligned. The timeline was clean. His absence became the final advantage. Weeks passed before the first message came through. Confused, then angry, then desperate. Questions about the account, about the divorce notice, about how this could happen without warning. The irony sat heavy. Warning signs had been everywhere, just never acknowledged. What he never realized was that silence doesn't always mean ignorance. Sometimes it means preparation. The secrets he thought were buried had already been uncovered, documented, and used. The life he tried to balance between lies had collapsed the moment he walked out that door, believing control was still his. By the time he understood the truth, there was nothing left to take, nothing left to explain, and no one left waiting. The goodbye was convincing enough to fool anyone watching. Tears clung to lashes, voice cracked at just the right moments, fingers held on a second longer than necessary. He believed every second of it. That was the easiest part, letting him think the heartbreak was real. What wasn't visible in that moment was everything already known. The late-night messages that weren't meant to be seen, the hotel bookings under familiar dates that were supposed to be work conferences, the quiet shift in his tone over months, like affection had become an obligation instead of instinct. And then came the confirmation. Undeniable proof that loyalty had been replaced with something careless and selfish. He thought distance would protect him, a 2-year contract overseas, far from questions, far from consequences. What he didn't understand was that distance doesn't erase truth, it sharpens it. The house felt different the moment the door closed behind him, not emptier, just clearer. Every corner held memories, but none of them carried confusion anymore. There was no more second-guessing, no more hoping things would somehow fix themselves. The illusion was gone, and what remained was a plan already set in motion. Access to everything had been shared for years: accounts, investments, decisions. Trust had built that system, but betrayal made it easy to dismantle. Quietly, carefully, everything was reviewed, transactions traced, amounts calculated. The $375,000 sitting between both names was no longer just savings, it was leverage. There was no rush. That's what made it work. Every move was deliberate, timed, and executed without emotion clouding judgment. By the time the transfer was complete, it wasn't impulsive, it was final. The divorce filing came next, clean, direct, unapologetic. No dramatic confrontation, no drawn-out arguments, just facts laid out in black and white, backed by everything he never thought would surface. His messages started as confusion, then quickly turned to anger. Accusations followed, desperate attempts to regain control. But control had already shifted long before he boarded that flight. He just didn't realize it. What he saw as absence became the very thing that sealed his loss. No presence to manipulate, no words to twist, no chance to rewrite the narrative, just distance, and the consequences waiting on the other side of it. By the time reality caught up to him, the story was already over, and every move he made had led him exactly there. There was no explosion when the truth surfaced. No screaming, no shattered glass, no desperate confrontation. Just a quiet shift, like something inside finally settled after months of unease. The signs had been there all along, scattered in small, careless ways. A message left open too long, a name repeated too often, a distance that grew without explanation. What he didn't realize was how closely everything had been observed. Every inconsistency, every excuse, every late arrival quietly noted and pieced together. The story he tried to maintain began unraveling on its own, thread by thread, until there was nothing left to question, just facts that couldn't be ignored. There was a time when loyalty felt unbreakable, when shared dreams made everything seem secure. But betrayal has a way of rewriting memories, turning once safe moments into something hollow. The hardest part wasn't discovering the truth. It was realizing how long it had been happening, hidden behind routine smiles and familiar routines. Still, there was no rush to react. Emotions were set aside, not because they didn't exist, but because they would only interfere with what needed to be done. Patience became power. Silence became strategy. While he carried on as if nothing had changed, careful steps were already unfolding behind the scenes. Financial records were reviewed in detail, joint accounts examined line by line, every dollar accounted for, every inconsistency noted. The $375,000 built over years of shared effort no longer symbolized partnership, it became evidence of what was at stake. He spoke about the future like it was still shared, unaware that those words no longer held weight. Plans were made with calm precision, each decision grounded in clarity instead of emotion. The legal process began long before he noticed anything had shifted. Documents were prepared, evidence secured, timelines aligned. And then came the opportunity he created himself, the 2-year job offer overseas. He saw it as advancement, as distance that would keep everything comfortable and controlled. What he failed to see was how perfectly it fit into a plan already waiting for the right moment. The goodbye was quiet, almost gentle. There was no need for drama. By then, everything had already been decided. Once he was gone, the final steps moved quickly. The funds were transferred without hesitation. The divorce filing was submitted with everything in place. No confusion, no room for denial. His reaction came too late. Questions, anger, disbelief. But none of it changed the outcome. The truth had already done its work. In the end, it wasn't anger that defined what happened. It was patience that made sure nothing was left undone. Trust didn't shatter all at once. It eroded slowly, in quiet, almost invisible ways. A changed tone, a guarded tone, conversations that felt rehearsed instead of real. At first, it was easy to dismiss, to believe stress or distance was to blame. But doubt has a way of growing when it's fed just enough truth. Then came the moment everything shifted. A message not meant to be seen. Words too intimate to misunderstand. Promises made to someone else, casually, like vows had never existed. That was the moment trust stopped being fragile and started becoming something else entirely. What followed wasn't confrontation, it was observation. Every move he made became part of a larger pattern. Every excuse was stored, every inconsistency tracked. He thought he was in control, carefully balancing two lives without consequence. What he didn't realize was that control had already begun to slip, quietly and completely. The game changed the moment his secrets were no longer hidden. There was no immediate reaction, no emotional outburst to warn him. Instead, everything stayed the same on the surface. The same routines, the same conversations, the same carefully timed smiles. He grew comfortable in that illusion, believing he had gotten away with everything. That belief became his biggest mistake. Behind that calm exterior, everything was being prepared. Financial access reviewed, accounts monitored. The $375,000 sitting between both names became more than savings. It became the center of a plan he never saw coming. Every transaction was understood, every option considered. Then came his decision to leave for 2 years, chasing opportunity without hesitation. He framed it as something for the future, something that would benefit both lives. But by then, there was no both left, only a final move waiting to be made. The goodbye he received was exactly what he expected: soft, emotional, convincing. It gave him confidence, reassurance that nothing had changed. That illusion followed him onto that flight, keeping him blind to what was already in motion. Once distance settled in, the shift happened quickly. The money was moved with precision. Legal steps followed immediately after, structured and undeniable. Evidence that had been quietly collected now carried weight, turning suspicion into fact. His response came in waves: confusion first, then anger, then desperation. Questions filled with disbelief, as if the outcome made no sense. But it made perfect sense. Every choice he made had led directly to this moment. In the end, it wasn't revenge that destroyed him. It was the truth he thought would never surface. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where secrets are exposed, lies are shattered, and every betrayal comes with a price. Stay tuned because the next twist might be even darker.